Okay, so I want to introduce you to another episode of the Beyond the Blade podcast. I'm super excited to have our guest today. This is Cody Simmons. He's the CEO and the co-founder of a very interesting product called DermaSensor. Cody's been in the bioengineering world for quite some time, and we're very excited to bring him onto our podcast to talk all about this very innovative technology that I've actually been using at my wellness center called Hydrology Wellness here in Miami. And we want to give Cody a chance to basically talk about the product, how it came to fruition, the technology behind it, and why it's an industry leader now in the market.
I appreciate that. Really excited to share our story and hear more about your experience with the device. Like you said, my name is Cody Simmons. I'm the co-founder and CEO. I've actually been at this for 8.5 years now. So it was just under an 8-year journey from when I joined to getting FDA clearance. So quite the process. And but I was very passionate about the space. I think any entrepreneur, often you really need to be willing to run through walls for the problem you're trying to solve, and that's something that I've certainly felt. I grew up in Florida playing tennis. I had my first biopsy actually as a teenager. My mom and my aunt had melanoma 15, 20 years ago. Fortunately, both were early stage. They were detected early, so not a problem. So it was always something I was familiar with. And after my graduate work in a biomaterials lab at Stanford, spent several years at Genentech, big oncology company. So, kind of cancer technologies and how to better detect them and treat them has really been my focus for the last, almost 20 years now. 15, a couple over 15. So, was really excited to come back to my home state of Florida and join co-founders Dr. Maurice Ferre and Chris Dewey. You might know that name.
Yes, absolutely.
So he's the co-founder and CEO of Mako Surgical, which ultimately went public and sold to Stryker for $1.7 billion, and is also the CEO now of Insight Tech, another successful medical device company. So it was great to join, very impressive, high caliber entrepreneurs and executives to get this off the ground. And what we started with was a 30-pound microwave-sized device. Yeah, so it was a big. They're like, "Yeah, but you're an engineer." I'm like, "Kind of." I mean, I've always been on more the business and commercial side of engineering, but new health technologies. Right. We hope to miniaturize it in a year, maybe year and a half, from a microwave down to this. Took more 3.5 years. But we knew the technology worked well, so 2 of our 4 issued patent families are from Boston University. And so they were a close collaborator. They invented this field of spectroscopy. So the technology, as you know, but for listeners, uses a type of optical spectroscopy that basically non-invasively samples skin tissue to detect malignant features. And so really our focus for the last decade has been, can we deliver a high-performing, easy-to-use tool that helps all physicians better assess suspicious lesions? Right. Because as you know, in your plastic surgery center and especially family medicine and internal medicine and gynecology, there's a lot of clinicians that are often asked, "Hey, what do you think about this mole? Should I go see a dermatologist?" And by definition, they are not a specialist. They're not a dermatologist that has spent years or decades specifically assessing and training on skin conditions. So having a tool to help improve skin cancer detection, help rule out lesions that maybe look concerning, but they're actually benign, can be a big benefit. So anyway, that's a couple minutes on a bit on my story and the company's story and what we've been focused on.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I mean, this tool, the DermaSensor, I mean, if you look at it, as Cody was saying, I mean, it really fits almost like in the palm of your hand. Super easy to use. It has a probe that basically helps you, to examine these questionable skin lesions. As a plastic surgeon, for me, in its application, I'm not a dermatologist, but in plastic surgery residency training, they make us go through a lot of dermatology training. So this has been fantastic because if I have been somewhat on the fence about maybe a particular skin lesion and I'm not really sure, this can give me some more added security. It gives me more data, more information, allows me to really dig deeper into a particular skin lesion that can really help make the difference. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about patient care, patient safety. It's all about trying to detect malignancies early, like you mentioned with your family members, that especially with melanoma, can really be a life or death situation for a lot of patients down here, especially in Florida, California, where we're in the sun all day long. We're playing tennis. I particularly now pickleball, right? Everybody's in pickleball. I mean, I'm outdoor cycling, at least 6 or 9 hours a week, and so it's or you're on the boat, So this is an amazing tool that has really helped me. As a plastic surgeon, I have the luxury of being able to remove these skin lesions, take them out, biopsy them, send them to the pathologist and have them reviewed, or I can have them sent to my dermatologist, my colleagues that are in the community that can, further investigate whether or not the lesion is what we think it is. But in this world, I think the most important thing to do is the prevention, the preventative medicine part of things, right? And this technology, for me, it falls in multiple categories, but one of them is prevention by really, just being alert to when you're doing a physical examination on a patient. And it doesn't matter if it's for a breast augmentation, right? Or if they're just there maybe because they want to have Botox done. It really doesn't matter. If you find something that you're not sure about, scan it, take a look at it, get a second. This is almost like an instant second opinion.
And two of our published studies actually show that the device's diagnostic accuracy and sensitivity or detection rate was comparable to, it was on par. The numerical values are actually slightly higher, but not significant, than in-person dermatologist assessment. And that's really been our focus. Can we put the diagnostic assessment or capabilities of specialists, of dermatologists, in the hands of physicians who are not specialized in dermatology, to give that kind of point of care second opinion. We're not saying it makes non-dermatologists as effective as at a whole body skin exam, for example, because you have to decide, okay, well, what lesions are suspicious enough to look at further, but for that suspicious lesion, which often I imagine in your case, and especially in primary care, who, our main focus is primary care to inform a referral decision, because they're, doing referrals, is often it's one lesion, right? Like the patient, hey, my wife noticed, or I think this is growing, this mole on my leg, what do you think? And our pivotal study with over 1,000 patients and 22 study centers that Mayo Clinic led, 2/3 of the patients had one lesion enrolled. So that as an example, right? So it's typically one lesion. Yeah. The remaining third, most of those were 2, some 3, kind of trailed off. 5 was the most. The likelihood a lesion was cancer, because as you know, a result of monitor is basically negative, right? That's kind of lowest risk. And then a positive result to investigate further comes with a 1 to 10 scale. So it's basically monitor 0, and then the 1 to 10 scale. So it's basically a 0 to 10 scale. And the likelihood it's cancer range from 3% for monitor or 0 up to 61% for a score of 10. So 3 to 61%. So that's a 20-fold difference in cancer likelihood. And you can get that information completely non-invasively and in 30 seconds. Yes. And so that's really, because before, and it's funny, I don't think, you may not have seen this as much as a physician. I think often maybe patients don't necessarily feel comfortable raising this with their physician, but I hear from friends all the time and family and business contacts I meet at conferences, like, oh my, this makes so much sense. How do doctors know? They just look at it for 2 seconds, right? Like, how do they know? Like they say oh, it's fine or it's not fine or, but how do they know? They just look at, and I'm like, well, I mean, certain physicians know quite well, like dermatologists train, thousands of hours and then have, daily experience with managing suspicious lesions, and they do biopsies, so they get that diagnosis 2 days later and, continue to train and get better, and exactly. But a lot of primary care physicians don't, A, have that training, and B, they're maybe only evaluating suspicious lesions a couple times a week. They're not regularly doing biopsies, so they don't know what the diagnosis ended up being, so there's no way to really get better. So that's really the problem we've been focused on, because only 8% of Americans at risk for skin cancer actually receive an annual skin exam. But as you know, the wait time for dermatologists is very long. So there's no way that the other 92% of Americans at risk for skin cancer can actually get an annual skin exam with the current dermatology restraints or community, because there's only 11,000 derms. So that's been like the long-standing public health solution, is can we upskill the 300,000 primary care doctors? The challenge is there's dozens, if not hundreds, of specialists that want the generalists to get better at their specialty,
For sure.
to help with certain things. But they're by definition, they are not specialized. Yeah, and like, how can a generalist become as good at, at hundreds or thousands of specific diseases as a specialist? It's impossible. So that's kind of what had been our vision, to kind of provide that enhanced specialist level diagnostic capability in the hands of frontline providers. So yeah, it's been really quite an honor to get some of the recognitions we've received recently. What was it? The end of October, we were on list of Time Magazine's Best Inventions of 2024. Thank you. And then late November, Fast Company, we were on the list of the next big things in tech in the medical care category. Oh, no, sorry. Medical care was Time Magazine. The small and mighty companies under 100, I think, were one of like 5 or something. And then what else was at the end of November? Oh, the Healthcare Technology Report, listed one of the top 100 healthcare technology companies in the world, maybe the country. But we were alongside Henry Schein and Regeneron and Medtronic. Obviously, there's some startups too. But yeah, no, so it's been very exciting. I think the industry recognition, popular media like Forbes and Stat and Reuters, a lot of different TV, NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox, and then what am I missing? Oh, the scientific community. Obviously, we had a lot of our own studies that we published, and we've been mentioned in various papers. But Nature itself, there was 2 articles. One was a commentary, one was a full paper just about the device. So it was really nice, actually. Yeah, so the one, and we had no idea it was coming out because they didn't contact the company for anything. Where I think kind of went off some of the studies and went off the FDA's announcement and kind of, and I sent the article to the FDA review team, who you get to know pretty well after a one year review process. Yeah, it was 1 year almost to the day, actually, and we submitted on February 2nd, 2023, and we got clearance on January 12th. 2024, so 2 weeks, under a year. And I sent the paper to them and said, obviously this is very meaningful. We're excited as a company, but also want to congratulate you, FDA, because it had some very complimentary. The Nature paper said that the approval clearance of the device marked a pivotal moment in digital health innovation, and that was it was something like paved the path for FDA authorization of AI tools in dermatology, because there had never been one before. So it was really a complimentary article and exciting for, I think, the dermatology and primary care communities as well when it comes to, new AI tools and dermatology. And hopefully there'll be more soon. Equipping you and
could be new innovators coming.
Colleagues. Yeah, I know there's some other entrepreneurs and companies using photos, which don't work particularly well for skin cancer because it's just surface level, but on psoriasis and eczema and acne and some of the non-life threatening diseases, the regulatory hurdles are a little lower, which makes sense, right? So I think some of those will be in your hands pretty soon too.
That's awesome. That's very cool. Tell me a little bit more about the whole FDA process, because you said it was almost pretty much a year. So how is that on your end, as a as an entrepreneur, developing the technology and bringing it to fruition?
Yeah, very long and expensive. I think the So the first 3.5 years were basically miniaturizing the device, right? We knew it worked well. Some of the studies at Boston University on various cancer types, some were skin, but also colon, esophageal. So the technology works to detect malignant tissue generally. It's not just skin cancer. So the early studies were really miniaturizing the device, and what was important was we kept the optical configuration. So the probe tip used to be at the end of a long fiber optic probe cable connected to that 30-pound microwave looking device. But the probe tip configuration, 400 micron emission fiber, 200 micron detection fiber with a 200 micron spacer, stayed consistent over all 4 generations of devices. So all of the lesions and the malignant spectral signatures that we gathered the first study started in 2011, has stayed consistent over time. So we were able to use all the data from those early studies to train the algorithm. So we've completed 15 studies in total. About half of them were algorithm training studies, right? Kind of using the data with the corresponding biopsy or diagnosis to teach the algorithm what's malignant and what's benign. And so those were kind of the early studies. And over the last, 2018 kind of, but in earnest 2020 were all the kind of prospective studies showing, okay, we've got the algorithm training data set, we have the miniaturized device, let's do prospective studies with the current final algorithm showing the technology works well. Because you can always, I think, a challenge with a lot of these papers, especially image-based, because there's so many biomarkers, you can always take a data set of a couple hundred lesions, 1,000 lesions, and pick an algorithm that works well on that specific data set. But then you give it to new doctors or new countries or new patients or skin of color patients, good luck. So I think that's what's been really challenging, why there's not currently a single image-based tool available that provides any kind of automated skin assessment, is you can get an algorithm that works well on a particular data set, but not on, with thousands of different doctors all around the country using it. So I think that's been the challenge for those image-based tools. So for us, luckily, because we're taking, it's part by design, obviously, we're taking these point measurements of lesions, we don't care what the surface level appearance is. The technology, we like describing it as the technology assesses the same thing that histopathologists look at under a microscope. So how they make diagnosis, right, is, okay, I seen a large nucleus, there's melanocyte clusters, presence of condensed chromatin. Those features reflect light differently to the eyeball of the doctor. Right. That's how human vision works. That's how they see it and diagnose it. Those features also reflect light differently to the device. So that's like the basic principle. And we've shown that performance is quite consistent across different users globally and different patient types and subgroups. And so to your question for the FDA, we submitted 6 clinical studies in total. Some, half of them were studies showing here's standalone how the device works compared to doctors. And so that's what we showed for melanoma. The device was on par with in-person derms. It was superior to PCPs head-to-head. But when you think about it, the real question is it's not really device versus doctor because the device isn't replacing doctors. It's doctor using the device versus doctor not using the device, right? AI-assisted doctor versus non-AI-assisted doctor. Yeah. So that was kind of the other aspects of the study. But yeah, the FDA, to their credit, I think were very rigorous looking at subgroups of skin of color, right? They wanted to make sure that there weren't potential biases in the technology performance and that this could result in health inequities because there have been a lot of studies that show that doctors are not as effective at assessing suspicious lesions on skin of color. Because you know better than me, obviously, but they visually appear different. Absolutely. Yeah. Right? And so you have less training on how to diagnose. Yeah, and so we were very happy that the optics literature and our studies all suggest that there's no performance difference, right? We didn't develop and power studies specifically to prove that, but one study had over 1,000 patients, another over 300 patients, and when you don't see any meaningful performance difference at all, That's pretty meaningful. And the pivotal study of the 1,000 patients, was 1,003, had 28% that were darker skin types, Fitzpatrick 4 to 6. So it's a pretty good representation. Ultimately, there weren't many cancers diagnosed on those patients. And so that's what the FDA kind of said, okay, we want you to collect data post-clearance to kind of continue to collect more cancers, but since we don't see any sign that it's working less well on darker skin, we're not restricting it, based on, we're not going to be, but they were very attuned to that because I'm sure you're familiar with, I don't know if you'd use on your patient, pulse oximetry devices that they found recently they don't work well in African Americans. And so that was something I think very top of mind for the FDA review team is we don't want to clear a device with no monitoring in place or anything for certain subgroups of patients. But what else did they ask about? Oh, is the performance potentially different on different body parts, on bony prominences, right? Like is a mole on your elbow? Yeah, because maybe your skin gets stretched more or something like that. So, exactly. So, no, I think a lot of very reasonable and scientifically relevant questions that luckily, and say maybe half of them we had thought of and looked into before, and half of them we had not. So I think definitely made us better as a company and as a scientific and clinical research organization, right? Just in terms of how to think about data and analyze data. And the FDA published a lot of that in their, I think it's like 40 pages decision summary on their website saying, here's what we looked at. They had us add, here's the breakdown of all the machine learning, the AI training data, so that people have visibility into here's what the algorithm was trained on, which is interesting, right? So these are some of the newer things they're doing with AI tools. And, for us, again, like the algorithm training specifics, we don't think matter that much because we're not based on the visual appearance. But still, I think having that transparency is a good...
Where do you see, because, it's like every other piece of technology, it's constantly evolving, right? Where do you see DermaSensor in the next 5 years or 10 years? Like where are we going to go? You think you're going to scale it even smaller? Or is it, where do you think you're going to go with it?
I mean, there's like 20 countries right now where there's distributors or device manufacturers kind of knocking our, and we do zero outreach, just inbound from LinkedIn or emails that kind of want to bring it to other countries. Obviously, some of those you have to go through new regulatory hurdles. So we're kind of like Brazil and the FDA in China, their equivalent, kind of want to typically see evidence from their own patients. So that could be, we spent about $25 million in total on our studies. So does the timeline and cost make sense? And, so we got to figure some of that out. So there's the international element. That's part one. There's the device itself, which you just raised. Miniaturizing it a bit sleeker. I think it's kind of cool. It's nice that it sort of looks like a smartphone. I think a little sleeker with a camera in it would be nice, and we could get the cost down a bit. But we have heard from doctors sometime that, they do when we mention this, that they're like, well, we do still want it to look like a medical device, though. Like we don't like if it looks like a little, pen, our patient's gonna feel like faith that this is a meaningful medical device and can trust this in our decision making. So we got to think about that. So that's the device. There's an international element, kind of next generation device. That'd be our 5th generation device. And then the last piece is what new algorithms could we develop exactly. And so what's exciting for us is the current algorithm is only trained on about 2,000 lesions. And each one, as you take 5 recordings to sample different parts of the lesion. But I mean, that's like there's publicly available data sets because obviously dermatologists and even some primary care and plastic surgeons take photos of lesions all the time, just part of standard of care. So there's publicly available data sets of dermoscopy images and clinical images that total millions of photos, like millions. And so we're so excited because we're first in class and best in class. And a lot of these imaging tools, there's hundreds of publications on applying algorithms to photos of lesions. There's dozens of companies that have tried to do what we've done. and they have millions of images available. We've done what we've done already with only 2,000 because it's a new technology. We had to enroll every single one in a study prior to clearance. Well, right now we have a couple hundred doctors using the device, only 6 months post-clearance, scanning about 1,000 lesions a month. If you fast forward that, we expect by second half of next year to be at 15,000 lesions a month. So just imagine when our 2,000 becomes 20,000, becomes 200,000, So I think that's what's exciting for us, and also specific algorithms. For example, the classifier or the algorithm right now is having to diagnose or detect melanoma, BCC, SCC, highly atypical nevi. The FDA, like formally meeting a public panel meeting a couple years ago, highly atypical nevi should be positive. Yes, they're not melanoma, but they're typically re-excised, as you know, kind of pre-melanomas, and is what people often tell me, doctors explain it to them, pre-melanomas. So should be kind of further evaluated at least, should be referred, or if tools are for biopsy, should be biopsied. So, it's hard to call all those positive, call a highly atypical mole positive, but call a moderately atypical mole negative. Like they're very, very similar. Even histopathologists disagree with each other all the time. So it's hard to do that for not just melanoma, but also BCC and SCC and the dozens of benign variants. But we've seen, okay, what if you don't worry about BCC and SCC and their variants? What if you just focus on melanoma? And it's melanoma or not melanoma? So we've seen that if you simplify the classification problem, then you can boost the performance a lot. So what we hope to do, right, is, okay, there's a device for all skin cancers. That's our current cleared algorithm. But what if you give the clinician an option saying, well, I'm not worried it's basal or squam. I'm just concerned it's melanoma. Melanoma algorithm. So you select the melanoma algorithm. You select the SCC algorithm. Yeah, so we kind of hope to add to the option. So when you clinically are confident that it's just for this specific differential diagnosis, instead of using our current catch-all algorithm, you can use exactly. And so we expect, based on preliminary data we've seen, looking at prior studies, sensitivity will go even higher, specificity will double. So we think that'll be really powerful. So hopefully we'll have that in your hands in a couple years.
Sounds amazing. No, it's just incredible how it compounds on itself. The technology just continues to compound and to get better and better and better. And you're going to have such a broad data set in the next 5 years. It's going to be incredible what you're going to be able to pull out of that with your research team. So,
do you want to show them the full device use here before we wrap up?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. It's funny. I joke. A dermatologist has almost biopsied this a couple times.
Oh, really?
So I'm glad. Well, give it a look clinically. What do you think?
Yeah. No,
It's like okay, 5 millimeter nevus,
right.
Probably fine, but.
Looks okay,
Yeah, so it's. I'm glad no one ever biopsied it, because now I joke it's my demo mole. It's like right on my forearm. Yeah, it's right on my forearm. I've probably scanned it 300-400 times by now, which shows the safety of the device. Every study we've ever done, there's never been a single adverse event.
Oh, it's amazing.
Because it uses light. It's like flashing a camera or a flashlight focused on your lesion. Yeah, so no safety issues. But the whole device use process. So the device will just sit there, exam room counter or nursing station. Where do you guys keep it?
We keep it in the exam rooms.
Exam rooms. Okay. So I just touched the screen. It kind of woke up, so it always stays turned on, same as your phone does. First step's a calibration step. So that's just making sure nothing's blocking the fiber optic probe tip, which, of course, that's not the case, because you and your staff, I'm sure, disinfect the device exactly with disinfectant wipe to make sure no makeup or dirt or anything like that. So the whole process, so now it's ready to record, having calibrated. So the first recording here, each one of these is assessing about 0.5 millimeter of tissue volumetrically. So I'm picking the device up, putting it back down. You can hear it, it's kind of pulsing and flashing. And I'm picking up, putting it back down to assess different parts of the lesion the same way a pathologist would under a microscope. So now the algorithm processed the data, and, oh, great. So a score of 1. And so that says, okay, investigate further. We see some features suggestive of cancer, but a score of 1, which in our pivotal study was a 6% chance of being cancer. So based on your clinical assessment, you're like, yeah, I'm not that worried about it. The device is not worried about it. Maybe we take a photo of it, check it again in 6 months when you're back, but not, follow up. But so that's it. So the whole process.
I didn't have to take the scalpel to your forearm.
And so exactly. So the device is indicated for referral use, but some physicians like yourself obviously have the comfort and ability to do biopsies as well and kind of get that diagnosis. Yeah.
Well, we wanted to thank you so much, Cody, for coming by. It's really, really a very, very interesting device. We love using it in our facility. I've really, really enjoyed it, and I think this is truly revolutionary technology. You guys are industry leaders in the field, and I'm so happy to see how DermaSensor is just going to get better and better and better and get into the hands of a lot of primary care physicians that they're not dermatologists, they're not plastic surgeons, but they can make a difference in the lives of a lot of patients that just don't have access to care. And so this is fantastic, and I applaud you for the very long and arduous road that it took as an entrepreneur.
I actually got shingles during the FDA review process. It was rough. I was like working 80, 100-hour weeks, and it was but we
glass, but you got through it, and you brought an amazing product to the market. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
And we hope to have you back on the podcast. And
maybe a year from now, catching up, see where things are at, and
where you're at. All right. Thank you so much.